from Whitney Media, 1460 WVOX, the Greenburgh Report with Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner. You can join in the conversation at 914-636-0110. Now on 1460 WVOX, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Good morning, Westchester. I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor. And today we're going to be talking about the needs of the developmentally disabled community. My guests are Loren Bohlen and Rochelle Stolzenberg. And they're parents of children or adults who have developmental disabilities. And one of the issues that has come up is a lack of affordable housing, especially for adults who are becoming a little older, and the parents are worried about what's going to happen to them after they are unable to take care of their children. So, Lauren, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Paul, and thanks for having Rochelle and I on. So I'm the parent of a 28-year-old with a developmental disability, and he is a very personable young man, very capable. He's able to communicate. He's able to contribute to the community, as is Rochelle's son, Sam. And we have been seeking housing solutions for our young and it's been very trying. OPWDD has made it really clear, which is, for anyone listening who doesn't know, that's the state office that oversees services for people with disabilities. It stands for the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, OPWDD. They've made it clear that they want adults to stay in their families' homes for as long as possible and receive services there rather than exploring housing options. And what this does is it creates a situation where we're waiting for an emergency to occur in order for them to be placed in a residence or in an
Hi, Lauren. It's
living.
Rochelle. I'm here, too. So I just wanted to pop in and say hi.
Rochelle.
And second, what you're saying here, it's very unfortunate that they are creating a situation where we're waiting for an emergency where, people of a certain age, if you're old enough to have an adult child that's, almost 30, you want to be able to launch them while you are still able to supervise that launch and tweak that launch and make sure that they are okay in an independent living situation.
Now, I thought that there were a whole bunch of group homes. I know the town board, every year or two, we get a request from an agency to place a group home, in the town, and we have them all over. So what's the difference of what you're seeking and the group home setting, and are there enough group homes?
Well, from what I hear, and it's only, what I hear anecdotally, and somebody could probably back this up, the agencies who used to monitor the group homes and set up the group homes are really trying to get out of that business, and they don't really want to own real estate. And I believe there are some legal issues with that as well. Group homes are much more restrictive. And also, if you get a placement in a group home, you can't necessarily decide who you're living with. My 28-year-old could be placed with a bunch of 60-year-olds.
Right. And just to add to what Rochelle just said, there is not the funding to create additional group homes was actually paused. And so agencies haven't been able to create group homes the way they once were. There was a time when a group of parents like Rochelle and I could get together and approach an agency and collaborate with them on starting a group home. But that's no longer permitted either. So the options have just become more and more narrow.
So New York State really is doing very, very little for the developmentally disabled population right now.
I mean,
it's a continual. Yeah.
Go ahead, Rochelle. It's fine.
No, it's a continual problem, and dealing with OPWDD is, they tend to obscure a lot of things and cloud a lot of things. And you talk to them and you try and, get some answers, and you're wading in a sea of internal acronyms. They use an acronym for everything, and you really don't know what it is. You need a decoder ring to speak to them.
Right. So if you have an older son, now is he able to? Are your kids able to handle being in a house themselves, or do they need supervision? Oh, we have to take a break, but right after the break, just for the 5-minute break, I want if we could touch on that, whether they're totally independent, because I know I've known your son for many years, and he's very high functioning. And I just want to know what type of extra services he would need. I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and after the break, we'll speak with Rochelle Stolzenberg and Loren Bohlen.
Now, back to the Greenburgh Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Good morning. I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and my guests today are Rochelle Stolzenberg and Loren Bohlen, and they're parents of children with who have developmental disabilities. They're very high functioning young people, and they're looking for housing, which really doesn't exist. And a lot of parents of older developmentally disabled adults are just nervous what's going to happen when they're unable to take care of them. The first question, I have, which we started talking about before the break, is if we create housing for your children, do they need extra attention? Does the state or county have to provide them with monitors, or are they high functioning enough that they can handle things themselves without any help?
I do want to say that this is a broad issue for many, many adults with disabilities, and that each is an individual and has their own level of support needed. And so one thing that we really want to advocate strongly for is to have a range of options so that every individual can get the support that they need in order to be as independent as possible in their community. And some individuals will need more support, and some individuals are able to be much more independent and will only need somebody checking in on them from time to time or what have you. But that range should be available depending on the needs of the adult. And so we do want to advocate for that. Our particular individuals do need a level of support. They're, again, just even between the two of them, they're very individual, and one may need a little bit more support than the other in some areas, but the other individual may need support in another way. So it's just really something to keep in mind. My son receives some funding available through self-direction through OPWDD, but that is a whole another conversation, to be honest, and I don't want to take us off track. But there are many, many access and equity issues with the way that the funding comes down for these young adults. We're not able to access all of it. We actually have to lay out money and then get reimbursed. So for any family that's not able to do that, they're not able to partake if they don't have
However,
the money.
I will say that my son is under the traditional supports. I haven't put him into self-direction yet. And even if you are in self-direction or you're receiving what they call traditional services, going into a housing situation, you know, these individuals generally have help attached to them, so that they would be entitled, say, to ComHab hours, community habilitation hours. So, somebody, paid for by the state through OPWDD, they would have somebody who, could look in on them, let's say, and manage their bills. Or they're entitled to paratransit. So they, both our sons, for example, can make and book their own power transit rides, and then they can get to doctor's appointments, to the grocery store, things like that. So the level of support, within the communities that they live in, we're not looking for those communities or that housing, if they're living in a regular apartment setting, to provide that support.
Right.
They're coming into that situation with support attached to them.
Since you've been involved in this cause, has the state done more, or right now with budget cuts over the past number of years, do you feel there's less services that are being offered to families with the developmentally disabled at the state level?
But, it seems to be less and less every year. And I think that, people may not be paying attention right now, but if you have a child with disabilities and your kid is 10, your kid is 14, you're going to blink your eyes and turn around and you will be right where we are. And I would predict there be, unless we address it now and try and make some changes now, there will be less options.
And Westchester has progressive lawmakers at the state level. Have they been helpful, or do we have advocates in Albany that are pushing for changes?
We have lawmakers that are receptive and that maybe we can talk to, but no, they're not, they're not putting forth any direct legislation at this point that would help this situation. We have people that are sympathetic, and certainly the need in Westchester for affordable housing is great as it is. But, we need affordable housing to those with disabilities, or they will be shut out.
Right. The town of Greenburgh, we had approved affordable workforce housing at Dromore, right near the Greenburgh Nature Center, and recently at a town board meeting with the developer, Walter Bolter, I suggested that some units be allocated for the developmentally disabled population. Does that make sense? And what do you think the chances are that we can make that happen?
It makes perfect sense. Thank you, Paul, because that's something. Right now, if our young adults with disabilities apply for affordable housing, we all know, that there's a much greater need than there is availability, and there's currently sometimes 10% of housing put aside for affordable housing, but there are also, minimums and maximums, and our young adults would be in the pool with everybody else. So we would like to advocate for there to be a priority group for affordable housing for adults with disabilities. We think that could make a big impact.
Great. We have to take another break. This is a little shorter, and we'll be back with Rochelle Stolzenberg and Loren Bohlen in a couple minutes, and then we will continue talking about the need for communities to mandate that a certain number of affordable workforce housing be allocated to the developmentally disabled population. I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor.
1460 WVOX. Now back to the Greenburgh Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Hi, I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and we have a very interesting program. My guests are Loren Bohlen and Rochelle Stolzenberg, and they're talking about the needs of the developmentally disabled community, especially the problems younger adults have in finding affordable housing. The town of Greenburgh is considering a requirement that a certain percentage of affordable housing that is built be designated for developmentally disabled, population. And we may have our first opportunity with Dromore Road. It's a workforce housing. I believe 45 units that will be built right near the Greenburgh Nature Center in the Edgemont section of town. And we had a brief conversation with developer, and how optimistic were you, Rochelle or Loren, about this initiative?
It's a really great idea, and certainly with your help, Paul, and if we can find some help in Albany, this could be part of the solution that we're looking for a problem for us and for many people.
Right. The only problem is there's not a lot of affordable housing being built in Westchester. But if every community does a little, it is better than what we have right now. So I think this is really a good idea. Every time I've initiated lobbying efforts for any causes, there's always obstacles and bumps in the road along the way. And what would you anticipate would be some of the objections people would have, and what do you think we could do proactively to minimize these type of objections?
I'm not sure if Rochelle just got cut off, but, there's a finite amount of affordable housing in Westchester, as we all just said. And so, sometimes people look at things that have a finite denominator and are concerned that if we give to one group, we're taking away from another. So to that, I would just say that, one thing is that with any luck, we'll all have disabilities one day, right? Because as we age, those things tend to crop up. But in addition to that, there was just recently an article in the paper that 1 in 4 adults has some form of disability or other. So I think just really keeping that in mind, that this is a growing population of people who need housing. And this is not something that detracts from the community, but rather adds to it, is really important in terms of getting community support.
And maybe
it impacts a lot of people.
Maybe what we could do is, instead of just asking for, say, having a requirement, say, of 10% affordable housing, maybe we could up it a little bit, so it doesn't take away from the affordable housing needs of the non-developmentally disabled population.
That would be great.
Because Greenburgh has a 10% affordable housing requirement. I believe that we were the first community in Westchester and possibly in the state of New York to require that. A number of years ago, that was probably in the 1990s. I wanted to also ask you to talk a little bit about some of the advocacy groups that exist that serve the developmentally disabled population.
Sure. Can I just check to see if Rochelle's still on?
Yes, I'm still here. Good. I had lost you for a minute, but I am back.
That's good.
Wonderful. And Paul, we really appreciate your leadership in this area, because you're right, Greenburgh is often at the forefront. And so if we did move that needle to 11 or 12%, it would make a huge impact. There are other organizations that are also working on this that we encourage folks to get involved with. One of them is GROW. Do you remember what the acronym stands for? Speaking of acronyms, Rochelle.
No, I'm at a loss when it comes to acronyms.
GROW is a great advocacy group that actually was started by parents in our same situation looking for housing for their young adults. So this has been an ongoing but growing problem, excuse the pun. There are other organizations out there as well. But that's one that comes to my mind that's very active in Lower Westchester. Can you think of some others, Rochelle?
Yeah, GROW is really the primary one. I mean, there are organizations, but they're not really advocacy organizations. They're organizations that will help you with people with special needs, but not, advocacy. And,
GROW is an organization that is a county-wide organization. It's the advocates for people with developmentally disabilities. I'm just looking at their website, and their phone number is 496-13, 18. And their website is www.grow-ny.org. And, I think that it's tough for parents who have children with developmental disabilities if they don't know about these organizations or the programs that are available. It could be very, very complicated and stressful, I guess.
Definitely. There are also centers for independent living, which is, it sounds like they work with housing, but they actually don't. Those are also, but they receive state funding, and they do some advocacy work sometimes as well. And so I just wanted to mention that as well. I know that there's a Center for Independent Living in Yonkers, and I'm not sure exactly where the other ones are in Westchester County.
Right. Could you also talk a little bit about your children? I know Sam. I've known him for many years. People, when they think of people with developmentally disabled disabilities, they may not realize how terrific they are at the work they do, how upbeat many of the young men and women are, how much they appreciate working. And could you just tell us a little bit about your kids?
Well, I can tell you about Sam, and again, thanks to Paul. Paul, helped open some doors to Sam becoming employed. And currently he's working at his summer job, which he loves more than anything. He's at Elmwood Day Camp. He is working as a maintenance worker. And, he's out there in the hot sun. He's mopping bathrooms. He's emptying garbage cans. And he loves it and is having the time of his life. I mean, and he's, integrated into the staff and into the social programming that they do with the staff. And it's really, it's a great thing. He's a super hard worker, and he doesn't complain, and he's happy as can be to be in that environment.
So for people who are thinking about hiring, when you hire somebody who's developmentally disabled, you may actually get an employee who is unbelievably good for your business. I know when Sam worked at the A&P in Scarsdale, I think he was like the most popular person in in the A&P. So a lot of businesses, when they hire people with developmentally disabilities, they start off thinking they're doing a good deed, but at the end of the time, they realize that they're the ones benefiting, not only the person they're hiring. Loren, could you talk about your kid?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think you said that really well, Paul, and I appreciate that. I think the other thing that I would add is that they're just incredibly reliable because they're some creatures of habit. And so Joe has never called in sick a day in his life, and it's something that he's really proud of. He's very punctual. He'll never be absent. So in addition to all of those other qualities that were already spoken of, I just wanted to add that one as well, because it's exactly what you're saying, Paul, that people sometimes don't realize that they're actually getting a great employee who's one of their most reliable employees and who will always, work hard and give it their all. So,
right. I mean, they are grateful to have the work. The work gives purpose and meaning to their lives, and there's a tendency. I hate to generalize about the population, but there is a tendency to sort of just put your head down and do the work.
Right. We have to take one more break, and then we'll be right back. I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor, with Loren Bohlen and Rochelle Stolzenberg. And I hope after this program, our listeners will join us in advocating for housing and job opportunities for the developmentally disabled population. I'm Paul Feiner.
Now, back to the Greenburgh Report on 1460 WVOX. Once again, here's Greenburgh Town Supervisor Paul Feiner.
Good morning, Westchester. I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and we're talking about the needs of the developmentally disabled population, the need for affordable housing, for jobs. I know I once attended a meeting of ARC, and I heard David Boies, who was a famous attorney, talk about how much good he got out of hiring developmentally disabled in his law office. So we talked about the need for affordable housing. We talked about the suggestion that communities require a certain number of affordable housing units that will be built in their community to be dedicated for the developmentally disabled, and why many of the developmentally disabled are such good workers. I also wanted to ask: is it easy to find a job if you're developmentally disabled, and how do you go about it?
It's very challenging. There's a much higher unemployment rate among people with disabilities than those without. And so there are organizations like Westchester ARC that assist, but there are definitely, barriers, some barriers just in terms of people's preconceived notions, like we were saying, and just in terms of, the workforce and what people are capable of and what their interests are, and then trying to match with work opportunities. You would think it would be getting easier. There's a lot of people looking for employees right now, but there are still many challenges to finding work for people with developmental disabilities. And like you just said, it's a win-win situation for the employer and for the employee.
Right.
Sometimes folks do have job coaches when needed from one of those organizations like Westchester ARC. So there are supports available for individuals who need them.
Right, yeah. Sam gets assistance from Cardinal McCluskey, and they provide him with a job developer and a job coach. Sometimes they need some job coaching, but that's not on the employer. Again, these services are attached to the individual. But, trying to land them a job, is very, very difficult.
Right. One of a new complex, the Chelsea, an assisted living facility, they were advertising for employers. They're right now hiring. So if you know anyone who is developmentally disabled, or anyone, a parent, or anyone who knows anyone who has developmentally disabilities, maybe that organization would be interested in in hiring. Are you finding that, like, a lot of the organizations that possibly, or businesses that can't find employees may not be considering the developmentally disabled as a viable option, and what could be done to overcome that challenge?
Well, I mean, there's a perception that they're limited in what they can do. There's a perception in that, it would take, it would be difficult to train such an individual. But, everybody is different, and everybody has, different skills that they bring to the table. Like we were mentioning before, there's a great ability to kind of put your head down and do the work. There's a great ability to, within this population, to enjoy repetitive tasks.
Right. And one of the suggestions that you made a number of months ago was when the town is considering future assisted living facilities, that there should be a requirement that at least one unit be allocated for the developmentally disabled. So they would hire a developmentally disabled, adult and reserve a spot, a room for them. And, I personally think it would be a win-win for everybody, because I think, the seniors who live in assisted living facilities are sometimes very lonely. They don't have family visiting them frequently, enough. And many of the developmentally disabled adults, they really enjoy talking to people. They're friendly. It's not a job. It becomes a love. So I think that the assisted living facilities would benefit greatly, because
there's great turnover at those facilities and staff. I mean, I just know from having, had my mother in one of these facilities. It's, you see a lot of staff turnover because, these are not exactly the highest paying jobs, but they're very diverse jobs. There are maintenance jobs. There are laundry jobs. There are kitchen jobs. There are lots of different work situations right in that complex, plus, the possibility to enjoy housing at the same time. Many of us drive around Greenburgh and say, like, oh, no, here comes another assisted living facility, and it's sort of the last thing, that we want. But if these facilities could be giving back to the community in this way, supplying jobs and housing to people with developmental disabilities, it's a win-win.
Right, and it's also provides companionship for the elderly, because if somebody just has a job and they're low-paying and they really don't love it, they're not going to really go the extra mile. Many of them aren't going to go the extra mile in terms of giving attention to the seniors who really need the support. On the other hand, if somebody really loves the job, they have a great personality, they're always upbeat, they could be fun friends for the elderly who otherwise are going to be lonely, and their condition is going to actually deteriorate because they're not getting the attention that they need.
That's so true. A little anecdote that part of my son Joe's program, they were doing volunteer work at a senior center, and he would talk about it, and he really loved it, and they told me he was really good at it, but I never really thought much about it, and then I had to drop him off once. Because he had a doctor's appointment in the morning. And when I tell you how the residents' faces just absolutely lit up, every single person knew him when he walked in, and he knew their names, and the social interaction was so positive in addition to the work that he was doing there. So I'm just saying that to underscore everything that you just said, Paul, because I definitely saw that for myself.
Right, and I find it very aggravating that that people just don't recognize that we're not talking about like a charity. We're talking about helping them even provide more excellent services to the people who they're taking care of.
Right, and a very stable workforce.
so you get stability.
No commuting required, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I see like nothing, no negatives. I see just a lot of positives to all this. And I should mention that, I'm really grateful to both of you for inspiring me to work on this. I really feel that we can make a difference. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this tape and share it with the state and share it with assisted living facilities. And, I really want to do whatever I can to see if we could at least make a difference. We only have about another minute or two, and I'm wondering if there's anything else that you would like to suggest or talk about.
I just want to thank you, Paul, for your leadership and your advocacy in this area. We really appreciate your partnership. It couldn't come at a better time.
That's right. I mean, just to be heard and, it is an achievement in itself. But, to have somebody who really wants to take action and help and think outside the box for solutions, it's really quite remarkable.
Well, it's not really remarkable until we get the results. So, I'm not going to give up until we accomplish something. And I definitely will ask the Greenburgh Town Board to put the concept of developmentally disabled, housing requirement on the agenda, on our work session agenda in the very near future. And we could also invite, GROW and even state lawmakers and county lawmakers, to the meeting, and assisted living facility operators. I feel we have to just put a lot of pressure, and I'm going to definitely give this the highest priority. So, I really want to thank both of you for being a guest. And if people are interested in getting involved in this effort, you could email me at pfeiner, PFEINER, at Greenburgh, BURGHNY.com, or you could call me at 989-1545 or 438-1343, and we will let you know what we're doing to pursue this cause, because we need help. And it's not only Greenburgh, but this should be done all over. If every community, when they're building housing, affordable housing, if it would be 2-3 units, it would make a difference. So I'm Paul Feiner. Thanks so much for joining us.